Is that working?
Yeah. Testing. Yeah. Great. After a slight false start, good afternoon and welcome to the Development Management Forum. I am Vicky Glover-Ward and I'm the Executive Member for Planning and Growth. A couple of housekeeping notes. We're not expecting a fire alarm this evening, so if you hear one, we all need to leg it to the fire exits. There's one at the front and one at the rear of the chamber. Toilets are in the main foyer, which is behind me, and we are recording the meeting on Teams, so can I ask that everybody remembers to use their microphones. This is not a hybrid meeting and questions will only be taken from those in the room, but we do have a few people online. Notes taken during the meeting by officers shall be available to view online via the Council's planning register using the application reference or address and shall be attached to the planning officer's report. Before we cover the more formal aspects of the meeting, I'd like to say a few words about what we're trying to achieve. The primary purpose of the Development Management Forum is to facilitate residents having their say about a planning application early in the process, so developers and planners have time to take that into full consideration. The intention of the forum is that major issues may be discussed in a safe environment that allows all parties to have a constructive discussion of the planning issues raised by the petitioners and to try and build consensus to resolve concerns. There is longer to speak for residents and applicants than at DMC, which is also at the end of the planning process, whereas the DMF should give the opportunity to discuss issues early in the process. The meeting will be relatively informal and timeframes are not going to be strictly enforced as they would do at a formal meeting, but if I can ask everybody to try and keep to time and stick to the point with the opportunity for questions later. If everybody can be polite and remember to be respectful, that would be appreciated. The base agenda for the meeting is this introduction. I'll then let the main parties introduce themselves. We'll take a presentation from the applicants and then the petitioners. There'll be then any questions that the petitioners want to ask of the applicants, summing up by the petitioners. I will try and build some consensus and sum up, and then we'll close. The meeting will be about 2 hours. I will try and keep us to about 2 hours. So the subject for this DMF application is the planning application on land on the west side of the A10, Buntingford, reference 3240966 OUT, outline planning application for the development of up to 600 dwellings, elderly accommodation, C3, mixed use local centre, including flexible use, E, F and sui generis, first school, informal and formal open space, associated works and infrastructure, including a new access from the A507 and pedestrian bridge over the A10, with all matters reserved except for access. The final decision on the planning application will be determined in accordance with the Council's constitution and scheme of delegation, which could be either by the Council's Development Management Committee or through delegation to officers in the Development Management team. So, if I can ask the main parties to introduce themselves, starting with the petitioner and her team.
Thank you. Good evening. We are from Throcking. I have John Wibbin, who is our Chair of Parish Council, Bryony Russ, who is a resident of Throcking, myself, Tracy Russ, also a resident of Throcking. And we're here to represent the community and would like to share our concerns about the proposal of the 600 houses that are proposed west of Buntingford. And basically, you know, to sort of discuss with the Neighbourhood Hearts District to make sure that things can sort of be in agreement. Main reasons for applying is to give voice to the general concerns expressed by the local residents from the application that we have received, to highlight the inadequacies of the existing road network, To support concerns from residents of Throcking and the preservation of the small village that we have, to raise wider concerns of the inadequate infrastructure of the area and the recent rapid expansion that we've had. So the three key areas really are highways and safety transport with the local transport and traffic, the landscape character of the location, and the infrastructure and its sustainability. Thank you.
And then if we can have councillors, Councillor Crystal, would you like to start us off?
Thanks very much. Yes, I'm Councillor Crystal. I'm leader of the council and ward councillor for Bengio.
Hello, I'm Councillor Sue Nichols. I'm Buntingford ward councillor, and that includes the parishes of Cotford and Throcking.
Hi, I'm Jeff Jones, County Councillor for Buntingford.
Tony Stowe, councillor for rural area, but I'm on the DMC as well.
David Andrews, councillor for Fundridge, Wearside and Westmill.
Simon Marlowe, on the DMC and councillor for Bishop Stortford South.
Stephen Watson, Ware St Mary's and chair of DMC.
Yvonne Estor, and
Thank you. And then if we can go to the applicants, and if you want to go straight into your presentation afterwards, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to the forum this evening. My name is Rhys Sadler. I'm a principal planner at Marrons, and we're representing Hallam Land as the applicant. I'm joined by James Duffy.
Sorry. Yep, it's James Duffy from JUB, representing the applicant and looking at transport.
And myself, Simon Pugh from David Locke Associates, representing the applicant on master planning and urban design matters.
I'm Sally Miller. I'm from Hallam Land Management, so the applicant in this case.
Great, thank you. Move on to the next slide, please. That'd be helpful. Thank you. Just by way of background to the proposal, Hallam Land Management have had an interest in this site since 2018 and had originally planned to bring this forward as part of the local plan, emerging local plan review process. But obviously, given the kind of slow progress on that in recent years and other applications and other things happening in the town more recently, Hallam saw this as a real opportunity to bring forward a comprehensive scheme which delivers not only to meet local needs, but also for real benefits for the town as well, and real tangible benefits for the town, and relate and using or responding to community concern around incremental growth that's happened over the last few years in the town, and also things like impacts on the high street, which is sought to address through the scheme. Hallam held a public engagement and have had several meetings with the town council and parish councils over the last few months in the early part of this year. Then held a public consultation event, which is well attended in the early part of this year. And those issues and those concerns have fed into the application, which was submitted earlier this year in May. Since then, we've entered into a planning performance agreement with the council, and I've been seeking to kind of address issues and work positively to make the scheme as best as possible. And that includes through a design review panel, which is also held today, with a view to obviously using that and comments we've had through the consultation, this forum to make improvements to the scheme as we move forward. I'm going to pass over to Simon, who's going to talk a bit about the design principles and the benefits of the scheme as we see them. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhys. I'm just going to run through a few of the key principles and the vision for the development. And I will be handing over to James sort of about halfway through just to talk about the transport matters. Next slide. So, yeah, relation to the highest level design principles, in particular relating to the landform of the site and the wider area, the core development components of the scheme are situated to the east of the ridgeline indicated by the dashed orange line cutting sort of northwest down to the southeast on the plan. Development, in terms of, again, the built element will not be visible from Cottrid. I think we're very much looking to maintain the existing outlook from the 507 corridor from the west to maintain that Buntingford in its existing form and in as proposed in its expanded form is not visible from that corridor. This will be covered through additional structural planting, which I'll come on to in a touch more detail in the coming slides. From the northwest and the north, Buntingford is currently visible, layered into the landscape, and that has very much been at the heart of the proposals and looking at the master plan for the development to come up with a similar layering of the proposals into that landscape. So again, building on the existing landform and development structure. Next slide, please. Part of acknowledging the historic character, vernacular materials and colours of the surrounding area is very much at the heart of the proposals. Looking at the detail going forward, we would see that element being a core part of any design coding going forward to make sure that development proposals are very much grounded in that local vernacular and historic character and the development forms. But on site, we don't have any particular issues with it, existing listed buildings, but the green infrastructure again is a key part of the proposals and the existing context. Green infrastructure, core element being the park, which again I'll come on to shortly, is to the west of the site, predominantly to the west of the existing ridge line, but is part of a transition from the development area, again where the built development is, the ridge line and down into the valley and blending into the open countryside to the west. Next slide, please. As part of the overall development concept, three key elements relating to movement, green and blue infrastructure, and then the land use development components. At the heart of the development, and again making sure that it's an integrated part of the town of Buntingford in particular, the east-west connectivity, where that green, and we see that green in both movement, transport, active travel, but also in terms of green connectivity and landscape connectivity to the town and from the town back out to the park. As part of that, there is the upgrading and improving of the existing crossings of the A10, again to make priority for active travel between the proposals and the town. Each of those following and again working with the landform within the site. To the north, the northerlymost crossing, sort of the east-west green arrows, that's in the location of the existing public right-of-way at-grade crossing of the A10. James will come on to that in a bit in terms of the improvements proposed there. The central one located at the existing bridge crossing across the A10, over the A10. Again, James will come on to the more detailed proposals that we're looking at there. And then the third connectivity point being Baldock Road across the A10 roundabout with improved safety and priority crossing for safe active travel. Fundamentally, one of the key aspects and the assets that is being proposed as part of the development for the wider community benefit as a real asset to the whole town is the idea of literally calling Buntingford Park as part of the proposals. I'll come on to that again in a bit more detail. But the various components within that will be buffer planting, again managing the intervisibility between the wider countryside, particularly to the west and the northwest, and the development, again as part of layering in the development to the wider landscape, including playing field provision, not only to meet the demands of the site, but responding to town council and community feedback about actually a shortfall of provision within the town and the wider area. Also including opportunities for food growing, whether they be allotments or orchards within it. And again, then clearly the development would need to mitigate its surface water runoff requirements, but these fundamentally will be provided at the low points of the site to the northeast of the area there. We've got the sort of very indicative blue ponds within the green infrastructure adjacent to the A10. But that would also be supplemented by finer grain swales to slow the flow of water from the development on its way there. In relation to key land uses as well as the residential development and the elderly housing provision, there's a new local centre to include local retail, and again clear emphasis on the proposals here, particularly in relation to the local centre, is to make sure that the uses here are complementary to the existing town and in particular the high street. But the local centre will also include proposals and potential for a health facility, and then again touching on the wider transport and mobility proposals, be a mobility hub there, so interchange between walking, cycling, bus, car clubs, whatnot. So again, offering opportunities for more sustainable transport. There's a site for First School adjacent to and again integrated with the local centre, and very much meeting the design requirements for such schools, as noted there on the slide, in particular on a site flat enough to be able to deliver the school buildings and the associated playing fields with it. Part of a separate application to the south of the 507, but just to give a fuller picture, is new employment provision, sort of just under 5 hectares of employment, again responding to feedback from town council and local community about actually the shortfall, the lack of opportunities for jobs or new businesses in and around the town, which is part of the sort of out commuting that is currently felt within the town itself. Next slide, please. So looking at Buntingford Park, just to give you a sense of scale. So the residential application to the north of the 507 is around about 23 hectares. Just to put that into perspective, that's 33 football pitches. So really considerable asset that is being proposed for the wider town. To the south, as part of the separate employment application, around about 5 hectares of further green infrastructure provision. But again, re-emphasising that that includes sport, play and wider community uses relative to that green infrastructure. Next slide, please. A key approach to the town park as well is it's not just one response to the park, is very much a transitional series of green spaces running from the A10, where we've got the connectivity into the existing town, where we've got wetlands, a bit more informal, around to the north, and then as we come down from the northern part on the western edge of the development area, looking at more formal uses where we've got the community growing spaces, allotments, and the formal playing pitches themselves, and then transitioning in very much into something which is more nature focused as we head down into the valley on that, very much on that larger expanse on the western side. And again, opportunity as part of the separate application to the south there for that to be further expanded. But overall, providing internal within the site a series of opportunities for loop walks or recreation, but very much tied into the wider town, and again offering a wider green loop of significant length throughout the wider town. Next slide, please. Thanks. So just looking at the green infrastructure environmental enhancements, again as part of that wider informal open space provision, and again this includes additional land further to the core of the country park, so the open spaces running through the core of the development area, now totaling over 24 hectares of green infrastructure. The assessment has looked at a biodiversity net gain of nearly 14%, which is well in excess of the requirements for BNG gain. But that is gained through enhancement of existing woodland, additional woodland, again performing that function of screen planting to again manage that wider interrelationship with the wider countryside, neutral grasslands, individual tree planting, so feature particular specimen trees within the open spaces, modified grassland, wildlife ponds in addition to the surface water ponds, but also enhancing the hedgerows and additional hedgerow planting within the development proposals itself. Next slide, please. Again, looking at enriching the overall town's offer, so as well as the residential there, so as new homes for future generations and expansion of the town, very much the local centre. Again, emphasising the complementary nature of this, not in competition with the existing facilities and the high street in particular, but also combining with the first school community facilities that can be provided there. And again, I think the detail of the more commercial development and the footprints would be of a really robust footprint, so it could be any number of uses, whether that be community, retail, leisure, small office units, again making sure that the built form is a very robust form that can adapt over time, not be limited to only one particular uses. But again, focusing on that having a mobility hub, walking and cycling routes very much integrated with that, giving access to the wider parkland, but also access into the wider town. Next slide, please. Again, just looking at the separate application to the south of the 507 as part of the wider offer, which I hinted at earlier, is about improving and offering a wider opportunity for local employment opportunities. And I think the way that we've looked at this, the land that is available, the land form, the potential development opportunities could be any number of uses, from office to small scale workshop units or grow on units, but of the small light industry, but very much providing the opportunity to support what we understand is existing businesses, particularly within the trades that already exist within the town. Thank you. Next slide. So I'll now hand you over to James just to look at wider connectivity.
Okay, so the plan on the screen at the moment just shows sort of the overall strategy, but we'll break it down into sort of individual sections. But the key element of this proposal is enhancing connections into Buntingford through sort of three key routes that we'll break down. So if we go to the next slide. Oh, so maybe move that. No, next slide, but there's something in the corner. So, okay. So the main access to the site will be a Dutch roundabout access, and that will be from the A507, and essentially that will have high quality pedestrian and cycle crossing points all around the access that will sort of facilitate active modes of transport. There will also be a proposed new pedestrian bridge to the north of the northeast corner of the site there, if you look on the diagram to the right there, and that will be connecting pedestrians right away 41 and 35, and that will connect the northern half of the site into Buntingford. There's also existing bridge crossing on the A10. There's a diagram there sort of showing our sort of a visualization there showing our thoughts in that regard. We're looking to either extend the existing pedestrian bridge or perhaps put one alongside that bridge. We're also looking to enhance the public right-of-way connections to the east of the A10, so that would be surfacing, lighting, and looking to sort of maintain, essentially trim back the hedges either side so they're well maintained, and put in a nice surfacing so it's fit for purpose. On site there'll be provision of local centre and school that will serve to reduce the need to travel off site, and there will also be high quality walking and cycling provision that will be provided internally to link in with those to encourage that active travel. In terms of the routes from the main access, we're also, if you go to the next slide, so to the left-hand side of that slide, you can see the proposed Dutch roundabout with the crossing, the pedestrian and cycle crossings around it. We're proposing to put in segregated footway and cycleway all the way connecting with the existing employment there and up until the roundabout. There'd be introduction of a toucan crossing there, control crossing across the roundabout, and also we're looking to improve the active travel infrastructure on the way into Buntingford itself, and that will include extending the width of the existing footway to have room for pedestrians and cyclists, and also to introduce crossing points with potentially raised tables to sort of calm traffic flows and to just encourage active travel movement in that area. If we go to the next slide. So the public transport links, so essentially we'll be looking to extend what sort of, at the moment there's the Greenways bus stop, and there's 3 services that actually connect with that site, and we're showing how with some small diversions that could come into our site, and we're proposing a mobility hub where that could connect with, and there would be a combination of a small diversion but also routes that can go all the way through the development and almost form a loop. So we're in discussions with the local highway authority about how that would work, and they've concluded that yes, a 30-minute service is achievable, and we're discussing financial contributions in that regard and how that would work. The introduction of the additional patronage would see improve the financial viability of the services, and it will just protect the long-term viability of those services into the future. And the mobility hub connection will essentially provide electric charging points, car club spaces, seating areas. It will almost be like a mini interchange, and that will be located near the local centre. We go to the next slide. So are we okay? Just a couple more slides. I'll be quick. Okay, so this is the vehicle connection. So yeah, we're proposing to reduce traffic speed on the route from the main access towards the A10. Majority of traffic is forecast to go towards the east, and we've essentially designed it in that way. And we've got there. We've presented some figures there on the sort of uplift to the west. As you can see, it's not a huge uplift. Most of the traffic will be going eastbound, and the way we've designed the access points. So, for example, the Throcking Lane access, we've designed it to have where the priority is going into the site, and the minor link will be coming from the west, the existing Throcking Lane road west, and that will deter traffic from running up to the west of the site. So if we go to the next slide. So this is sort of an indication of how the sort of character change of the A507 around sort of our as it connects into the A10. So yeah, showing that yeah, bus stops, lighting, introduced segregated cycling and footway, and general environmental improvements. We go to the next slide. And there's Throcking lanes, again 30 miles per hour in the distance is essentially where we're going to change the priority of the road and have the western facing arm being the minor link to discourage traffic from going in that direction. So for the next slide. Okay, so this is sort of looking at drainage. So it's proposed that to just discharge surface water runoff into existing watercourses and drainage ditches. The flows will be restricted to greenfield runoff, so attenuation is provided there to ensure that. It proposed to discharge foul flows to the existing Thames Water public sewer network, and we're aware of concerns of existing capacity concerns in regards to the foul network, but we in terms of new development, Thames Water are are obligated to provide additional capacity, and they will need to provide associated calculations to calculate what additional capacity they need to provide. Next slide.
Yeah, thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to answering any questions shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Petitioners.
Thank you. I'll speak first. Right, so I'm the chair of the Cotterwood and Throcking Parish Council. The proposed development is opposed by our residents who came to us and asked us to object to it, which we have done. Reference has been made to broader, wider connectivity, so let me talk about what that wider connectivity actually is. So to the north of the site is Throcking Lane. It is, for its entire length, a single lane track. It's a rural road. It could not possibly be any narrower and accommodate the axle of any kind of motor vehicle. There's no hard shoulder on either side. The turnouts are few and far between. Personally, I will not bring a car onto that lane if I can anyway avoid it. I find it difficult enough to walk along it and find a place to go if I meet an oncoming vehicle. I would encourage everybody here, please, to go onto Google Street View and take a walk along it. You will see what the true character of that lane actually is. To the south is Baldock Road, sometimes known as the A507. I also happen to be the chairman of the A Safer A507 campaign, whose mandate came from a petition in 2017 signed by 1,160 residents of the A507 corridor. That petition was to have the A507 reclassified as a B road to recognize its true nature and character, as well as to impose a 7.5-ton weight restriction on the road. We've managed to achieve the latter. We are still working towards the former, and it is still part of our goal, most definitely, to do so. In discussions with members of our campaign, Hearts Highways have acknowledged and accepted that if this road were to be classified today, it most certainly would not meet the criteria to be an A road. It is a B road in its nature and character. Historically, it's an A road. The corner of one end of Cotterwood is a tight blind bend where two lorries can't pass each other simultaneously, and in the past have managed to get stuck. The homes on that bend are built right close up to the road, and anyone who navigates around that bend will come within feet of the living space of the people who live there. It's certainly the case that every vehicle that comes through the village of Cotterwood or the village of Throcking is seen and heard, and its vibrations are felt. Now, I've heard about increased sources of work. I'm afraid I just don't think that that's how it works. I don't think people who live in the development are likely to work in the local area, which means that there will be commuting. More commuting obviously means more motor cars. The nearest railway station is Baldock. To get to Baldock, you have to, of course, commute in a motor car all the way through the village of Throcking. 9,500 vehicles were measured to pass through Cotterwood every single day in a 24-hour period. This was calculated in 2018. The peak flow being 1,000 vehicles per hour. That's a 2018 report of Hearts Highways that was commissioned by Councillor Jones behind me using his locality budget. That report also concluded that it simply was not safe to install a pedestrian crossing anywhere in Cotterwood because there wasn't adequate visibility or adequate lighting, which means that unfortunately the village is now bisected and people on the one side have a great deal of difficulty getting over to the other. If we're going to prevent a situation where we have a kind of a Berlin Wall between the facilities on the one side of the village and the other, then we need fewer cars commuting through the village, not more. The parish council is also acutely aware of what happens in Throcking whenever Thames Water, Affinity Water, or one of the other statutory undertakers, or even the police naively divert traffic through Throcking because there's some incident on the Baldock Road in Cotterid. I have personally witnessed Throcking villagers walking backwards, holding torches in the middle of the night, behind reversing lorries, trying to help them to get out so that some oncoming car can pass. The parish council has had to threaten Affinity Water in the past with lawsuits to get them to repair the damage to verges and gardens and road that happens every single time that is done. I've considered the development. There is no plan to prevent or seriously discourage residents or construction vehicles from passing through Throcking to and from the proposed development. It's just assumed that Cotterid will take the additional volume of traffic as part of the wider network. Suggest that what is needed here is a plan-led approach to development in the area that begins with accepting the limitations of the existing infrastructure or upgrading it significantly first before we talk about a development of this nature. I'll now turn over to Tracy as a resident of Throcking Village.
Yes, hello. My name's Tracy Russ. I'm a resident of Throcking, have been for well over 30 years. I find this a very difficult subject actually to talk about because I love Throcking. I brought my children up there and I feel that this is actually the verge of destruction of a very historical village. I've written what I want to say because this is very emotive for me, so I apologise if it's robotic, but I feel I ought to keep emotion out of this as much as I possibly can. So the landscape and character. At a national scale, the site falls to England's NCA 86 setting out of general objectives of the area for the SE01 to maintain and enhance the character of rural landscape by maintaining agricultural productivity, encouraging sustainable land management practices that protect and enhance the landscape, geodiversity and biodiversity assets, and the benefit of carbon storage and water, as well as the overriding sense of place. The area incorporating the ancient village of Throcking is largely unchanged from Domesday times, when the village was all so small. It was a small settlement that was surrounded by fields. Throcking Church dates from the 13th century, and the Great Barn remains in Throcking, together with its legacy to feeding the residents in times of famine.
Next slide, please.
The vista of the surrounding buildings have changed little over the century. The residents of Throcking,
Next slide, please.
the residents of Buntingford are accepting in the limited amenities and infrastructure that a small town brings, because these are offset by the pleasant and relatively open environment. To remove this advantage for a new development in a town is quite unreasonable. Most concerningly, the land adjacent to the site is controlled by the same landowner, and this must be noted in terms of the potential cumulative impact. The adjacent site westwards contains Thistley Valley Brook, part of a rare chalk stream system. There are only 200 of these in existence in the world. The importance of protecting this and Buntingford from further expansion cannot and must not be overstated. With the location, the BCA Neighbourhood Plan emphasises the desirability of conserving and respecting the valley settings of Buntingford and ensuring it's contained within its valley context. The site proposed would force Buntingford to apply to extend its boundary to a site naturally severed by a busy A road to provide an infrastructure. The policy of the BCA Neighbourhood Plan says that development proposals should be appropriate to maintain the Rib Valley setting in the Buntingford area community. A quote which stood out to me from the policy of the HD2 of the plans said, Based on an analysis of the impact new housing development, all new housing should be limited in height to a level that ensures that there are no adverse impact on the views from the surrounding countrysides and keeping in the character of the BCA. Although the development, as you point, is not seen from Cotterid, Throcking is in the middle. Self-evidently, this application fails to respect these policies, to preserve the identified protected views of the surrounding countryside and to prevent urban encroachment surrounding the countryside. These proposals are clearly contrary to the development plan policies that should normally be refused on just that basis alone. That's done with the photos. With planning policy, for this proposal, planning laws require applications to be decided by the adopted East Herts Plan and the BCA Neighbourhood Plan. The proposals presented conflict with the EHDP and in particular with the key settlement policies in the plan, including the DPS2, which specifically ruled out any further housing development outside Buntingford's settlement area. The settlement boundaries of both Buntingford and Cotterid are shown on pages 43 and 44 of the plan, and this application for land is entirely outside that boundary. The level of development already committed through the approval of planning applications is over 1,000 homes. Because of its poor infrastructure, no strategic sites are allocated to Buntingford as part of the existing district plan, which expires in 2031. Buntingford is one of the smallest towns in the district. Our population has grown from less than 5,000 to over 8,000 since the 2011 census. It currently has insufficient employment opportunities, has no railway station, it is not well connected to nearby settlements, communities, by even a bus. Therefore, the town is a less suitable location for this development. It should not be forgotten that the developers control other sites here. The cumulative impact of 3 sites should be considered, building on the south side of the 507 for industrial units, the 3rd site for building a solar farm in addition to this. In summary, a resident also commented, if Buntingford is targeted for expansion, then this cannot be done by this sort of large piecemeal scheme, which then benefits only the pockets of the landowner and the developers, at the expense of the local residents. A debate is needed between the new additional government, county and district councils and local people about the nature and scale and location of any expansions of this once characterful town. And in the spirit of this forum, I will leave you with that last comment and hand over to Bryony.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm Bryony. I've lived in Throcking 30 years and I'm a local Buntingford business owner, small business owner. I feel as though you've done some of the argument for us by talking about the green space that you want to include, because I feel like we have the green space, so that's half of the argument done for us, I believe. So I'll be talking about the unsustainable site severed by the A10 and the inadequate services. Catherine Tallis of Buntingford is quoted, "The infrastructure of the town won't support this development. Buntingford is already overdeveloped. Our sewers are overflowing. We have raw sewage flooding out of drains in heavy downpours. The town is designed as a small town. The town has grown rapidly, yet our infrastructure and amenities have reduced. This development will heap more strain on infrastructure. Transport links are underdeveloped, meaning householders will be reliant on cars for commuting, as John has already pointed out, and having further detrimental impact on the character of the local area. It is a small community and it is very underdeveloped. So In terms of the sustainability, according to the National Planning Policy Framework, NPPF, page 5, paragraph 8, for a development to be regarded as sustainable, it must meet 3 criteria. The proposed housing development is poorly located, severed by the A10, and located outside of the settlement boundary of Buntingford, in conflict with the direct district and neighbourhood plans. It would also build on top of a plateau of arable agricultural land and would cause considerable harm to Throcking and Buntingford's rural settings and wider landscape. Development of an agricultural setting, displacing deer, hedgehogs, badgers, barn owls, a new pair of tawny owls nesting for the 2nd year running, bats, woodpeckers, kites, and crested newt populations, to name a few. I could go on, but these populations are dwindling and it is our responsibility to protect them. The proposed development does not meet the criteria for an economic objective because this land has not been identified for housing use, and it is arable land which supports food production, and there is no evidence that the developer has identified and coordinated the provision or improvement of infrastructure to support the site. To highlight the importance of the BCANP, we are currently at war for democracy and to protect our rights as human beings. 94% of Buntingford voted for the current BCANP. And if we allow you to build upon the land that is outside of that democratic vote and agreement, then we are going against the democratic right of all of us who voted for that. And I needn't remind you of a certain someone in news feeds lately who does not have regard for that democratic right. And look at where we are now. We must fight for this, and it is certainly not right that you feel you can disregard the BCANP. The economic development statement from the developers is unrealistic. It is a well-documented fact that as there is very little employment in the town, hospitality and education being the highest employers, those in full-time employment travel to larger towns, and with the largest employers for their day-to-day work, examples are Glaxo in Ware and Stevenage, Johnson Matthey in Royston, Stansted Airport, Bishop Stortford, etc. It should be noted that these towns also include Hertford and Sawbridgeworth, which have direct connections to London and Cambridge. Regular, reliable transport is not readily available, therefore existing and new residents will need to use a car to get to work, against the policies to encourage reduction in car usage. There is a relatively high percentage of self-employed workers who need vans, etc., to be able to carry out their day-to-day activities, as can be seen just by driving around the existing housing estates at night to see the number of vans parked on driveways and roads. Socially, I would like to draw your attention to the EHCP Chapter 19.1.1. For communities to be successful, it is vital that they are well served by a full range of services and infrastructure which are appropriate for people's needs and accessible to all. With an ageing population, local access to healthcare facilities is an important part of everyday life, and that provision of such facilities within a community accessible by choice of sustainable travel options. We do have a park, we do have a very large care home at Leyston Grove. I teach there, it's lovely, there are rooms available there. We have some of the things that you've outlined you want to put in this site. We have that. Facilities which assist in individuals maintaining a healthy and active old age will become more important in East Herts. Local retail offerings would have local monopoly, selling items at a premium. Elderly could not walk safely to Buntingford. If you can't drive anymore, visualize a mobility scooter over the footbridge or the Toucan crossing across an extremely dangerous part of the A10, And pedestrianising the A507 is an extremely scary thought for those of us who know what that looks like. Yeah, it's just hard to imagine. And the bypass would no longer be a bypass. It would become the town centre. It would no longer be a bypass. Buntingford, as a rural town with no train station, poor public transport, and a mainly rural road network, the impact would not only be to sustainable increase local traffic, but to promote increase in private car journeys. I shall conclude. Bear with me, sorry. To sum up the feelings of residents as a whole, Mrs. Janet Wright said, "We do not have the capacity for any more new housing or housing developments in Buntingford. There is no infrastructure to support all of the additional services and needs. Drains cannot cope. The roads are a shambles. The council cannot maintain the area. All public footpaths are left, overgrown. We have built way over our fair share over our beautiful fields. The anxiety and mental health issues this has caused the people of Buntingford and surrounding villages is unforgivable. I have many students and neighbours near to tears with what you are proposing to do in order to decimate their land, their home, in places that they have lived all their lives. And I shall leave you with that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I can invite you to make any comments on the issues that have been raised.
Yeah, just to say I understand your concerns, but I suppose the way we've looked to design the proposals is to be as sustainable as possible, so to minimise car use. Hopefully you've seen from our slides that we're promoting connections into Buntingford so that people would walk and cycling to reduce car use. In terms of Throcking Lane and in terms of Baldock Road, well, we're looking to change the character. So I understand your comments about the way those roads at present and how they are the character of those roads, but we're looking to change that. We're looking to introduce a gateway feature and make those roads safer for active users, so to encourage more active transport journeys. Same thing with the buses. You know, we're looking to bring them into the site. We're looking to contribute to buses and improve those to sort of maximise the amount of journeys by sustainable modes, so there is less impact by cars. And we're proposing to introduce a travel plan early on in the process that will encourage, so as soon as people start to move, if the site does get consent, if they moved into each house, there'd be various measures to encourage them to travel sustainably from the very outset. And in terms of the way we've approached, hopefully you've seen from the slides, we note your concerns about Throcking and Cotterhead and the traffic going in that direction. Our goal is to promote traffic in the other direction. So we're trying to reduce traffic as much as possible. That's why we've put a variety of uses to sort of, so everyday journeys as far as possible are made on foot and by bicycle. But we've introduced measures, so on Throcking Lane, as you've seen, changing the priority there to try and deter people from going in that direction. We will look to sort of just the way that where the accesses are, I couldn't really see the need for them to turn that way. I think it would be more that they'd be looking to go to the east if they are travelling by car. I think the big draw is to the south on the A10, and just having it in this location as well, so it reduces pressure on Buntingford as well, because it's connected to the sort of higher order roads. It's got an easier connection to get to those parts of the road network.
Hi, thank you very much. I really appreciate all of your feedback there. That's really helpful. I'd just like to touch back on some of the highways points that you made initially. So obviously the aspirations to turn the 507 into a B road. So is that, I'd just be interested to know if there's anything that we could do to help facilitate that at all, or is, what are the steps that sort of you're taking for that? Is there something that we can do to feed into that process or help with discussions around the crossing point within Cottered?
Please do.
Yeah, I mean, what would help is for there to be fewer motor cars traveling along that road, right? I mean, the more traffic you have, the stronger the highways authorities' argument that it needs to be an A road is. Their argument, as best I understand it, is summarized as once an A road, always an A road. Nothing tremendously more sophisticated than that. I mean, what I'd like to understand is how somebody who is going to be a resident of your development, who has a job in Bedford or Luton or Hitchin or Stevenage, how they're going to use the A10 to get to work when let's imagine that 50% of them exit from the Throcking Lane side of the development and the other 50% exit through the Dutch roundabout at the bottom. Which direction are they going? I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me, but maybe I've misunderstood something.
Just to pick up on Throcking Lane, certainly, and James, I'm sure, will add any detail. We certainly not perceived that the northern half of the site will go out through the Throcking Lane entrance and the southern half will go out through Baldock Road. The premise is very much about the majority of movements through the 507, and what does go out through the northern access it would go towards the A10, and I think that goes to the heart of the reprioritising of Throcking Lane. And I just note and completely agree with you, the vast majority of Throcking Lane through the village is absolutely single track and inappropriate. The element that we're looking to divert is a sort of 2 lanes as it then joins onto the A10. So it was the 2-lane element that we would look to take into the development. So it was just a small point there that we were just looking to pick up. In relation to crossing points, to create safe crossings within the village of Cottered, is that something we can help to look at with you to see whether that can be done as one of the sort of off-site interventions to improve it? Because I think one of the other things clearly with the 507 Baldock Road going up to Baldock is making sure that the HGV restriction is removed, and I think that would make a really big difference to the village and ensuring that carries through.
Yeah, the issue with the pedestrian crossing was that unless you put street lighting throughout the village, it's dangerous to encourage people to try to cross the road in the circumstances that currently exist where the sight lines are so poor. I don't think that the village wants to be lit up with street lights all night, nor do I think that that's the direction of travel from an environmental perspective. What is needed is for traffic to go in a different direction. I've heard what you say, but if somebody works in Royston or in Cambridge, I can understand that they will exit, as you say, and go onto the A10. But if they work in any of the other places that I've just mentioned, then they're going through Throcking, or they're going through Cottered, or they're going through both.
Have you got any more statements you want? Because I think we've morphed almost into the questioning part anyway. So if you're happy, or if you've got one more thing to say.
Yeah, I mean, just one point in relation to sort of the Thistley Brook as a chalk stream. I think we recognise the importance of that. And again, I think this is to do with the importance of the development being on the other side of that, so there's no surface water going into that area from the development. It's all about the green infrastructure there, so there's no development related surface water going into the stream. I think also in relation to wildlife habitat, the proposals throughout the park that can be achieved but actually benefit overall new and existing wildlife habitat that is there, rather than the ploughed fields which predominate over the existing site. Just last point.
Okay, so I'm going to invite questions from the applicant. First from the petitioners.
So many questions and so little time. Really, one of the questions is to protect Throcking. Is why has a loop road not been considered? I mean, I cannot see how you are actually going to build that site without anything coming through Throcking. So how do you protect Throcking from your vehicles coming to develop?
So when you say a loop road, can you explain?
Well, yeah, because we're sort of in the middle. So you have Buntingford, and you have Cottered, and you have Throcking. Mm-hmm. You cannot build on that site without vehicles coming through Throcking. They will come from the pits at Stevenage to bring hardcore, to bring aggregate. I mean, I know what's happening. I see it, so I know exactly what's happening. How do you propose to protect Throcking?
So in terms of obviously the construction phase, I think that was obviously something that you did mention. So with any new development, there is conditions put in place with any planning provision that there is a construction management plan put in place, and that's as a condition. Nothing can take place until that has been agreed with the council. So and that actually sets out the routes that vehicles can take to access the site to facilitate the development. So that sort of sets the times that they can run, the routes that they can take, and it involves things like street cleaning, and so it's to that level of detail. So that has to be put in place before any development can take place.
But the 507 is the main link. As I understand it, you've got to build a roundabout on the 507. So how do you protect us from that? Because when you close the 507 to build the roundabout for your new development, the traffic has to come through Throcking. So I ask again, how will you protect Throcking? Why have you not considered a loop road? Because when the 507 is closed, as John has explained, even if we have a water leak or an accident, everything comes through Throcking. So how will you protect Throcking?
Just when you say loop road, it's yeah.
So you have to close the 507 to build a roundabout. Yes, you're anticipating in building a roundabout in the 507 so cars can get into your new.
Not necessarily. It could be done through a lot of off-site works. You could have road narrowing. It doesn't necessarily mean that the whole road would be closed.
The main road from Buntingford to anywhere else, so Buntingford, Bedford, Stevenage, it's one road. If that road is closed, it comes through Throcking.
I understand what you're saying. I think there are obviously, in terms of traffic management for infrastructure development, there are many ways that can be managed. So they don't shut the road for the entirety of the time that they're developing the roundabout. So as James was alluding to, so you almost build sort of almost half of a roundabout and you have a lane of traffic still going, and then you maybe build the other half and you still got so the road I don't think would ever necessarily be closed the whole time.
This is a small road. It's two-way traffic. That's it. I seriously do not feel that all consideration has been taken when looking at the site that this actually is. I don't believe that you have considered the site or the people surrounding it.
Yeah, just quickly on that point, if traffic understands that there's going to be a hold up at the bottom of the A507 and it's coming from the north, it will take the Throcking Road exit in the middle of Cotterid because people know that will be quick.
I think maybe we've done this to death unless you've got an answer for it.
No, only just to say that the construction traffic management plan sets out routes to the site in terms of, so we can fix it to the A10, and in terms of building the roundabout itself, that can be done in stages. I take your point that there might be some small disruption if there was some lane closures, but there's things you can do again to minimise when you do that. You might do that in certain times when it's less busy, or so. It needs to be looked at it essentially would need to be agreed at that stage, the construction traffic management plan, but we are used to, as in terms of developments, it's quite common to have sort of consultation with the local highway authority, and they present with conditions to say, okay, well, protect villages and ensure that those aren't affected materially by traffic.
Why was this particular site chosen, the west of 507? Why was that actually chosen? Why that site exactly?
Yeah, so I think if you look at Buntingford as a whole, we're obviously, at the moment it sits to the east of the A10. We're also aware that there has been historical incremental growth around the town. All of that traffic has to go through the town centre to access back to the A10. So there are existing issues within the town centre in terms of that traffic impact. So if you consider development further to the east, that all of that traffic has to come through the town to access any sort of strategic routes. We also felt that this provided actually sort of if you look at the overall kind of built form of Buntingford, it actually creates sort of a rounding of the town, and there are obviously existing footpath crossings there as well. So we were pleased that this looked like a site where there were good potential for those points of connection and active travel.
I think just to add, sorry, I think as well, I think in terms of this kind of scale of development, I think given previous experience in Buntingford of kind of more smaller scale residential schemes coming forward and the lack of kind of supporting infrastructure on those, I think the benefits in terms of the additional infrastructure that can come forward to serve both new residents but also the town and the wider community was quite a critical point, and something we thought would be worth kind of drawing out in terms of those benefits as well.
So I'll just counteract that, because when you say the traffic goes through the town, it does not go through the town. We had a bypass built. We had a bypass built so that the town of Buntingford could have fairly even pedestrian access. We sort of go about our daily lives, the people that live there. So it does not go through the town. We had a bypass built. I feel that you are actually going to build a smaller town the other side of the bypass. And I remember having a conversation with Jeff, who's sitting behind me, and I laughed and said, oh my goodness, we are now going to need a bypass to bypass the bypass. That is where we are. So you are intrinsically going to build a town the other side of the bypass. So if that happens, who protects the town of Buntingford when they have no bypass and the amount of traffic that you are, and the word encouragement is actually repeated time and time again, you are actively encouraging traffic into our small villages and small town, putting people at risk because we will lose the bypass.
I also wanted to say, because you said you're adding infrastructure, but you said you're going to tap into the existing sewerage, and which is, I mean, well, yeah. So, I mean, if you went to Buntingford yesterday, the flooding was really bad. Shops and people have sewerage. It's really awful. So Thames Water is struggling. The existing system that you have said that you are going to add 600 homes to is not suitable. It's not. That's a fact. There's no debate about that. You're going to add 600 homes to that existing non-suitable system. So because you just said you're going to add new infrastructure, but you're not adding you're not improving that at all. And yeah, I guess that does lead to the next question, is where is the sewage going to go? Because we are not on mains, so Throcking is not attached to mains. So yeah, you are going to go into the existing system that doesn't exist. And yeah, the sewage ends up in people's homes, unfortunately, in Buntingford.
Yeah, I understand the issue. It's been raised to us a number of times, and it absolutely needs sorting out. And that is, I think, what James was alluding to when he was speaking earlier. So absolutely, it's Thames Water's responsibility to sort out the foul sewage system. They are under an obligation. So if any development gets planning permission, they are under an obligation to work with that developer. The developer will make financial contributions to allow Thames Water to increase the capacity within the sewerage system to allow them to take the capacity from the new development. So yes, I know there's an issue, and absolutely appreciate there's an issue, a current issue. And yes, without additional improvements, absolutely 600 homes would massively exacerbate that. But Thames Water are obliged through contributions to improve that system. So, and that will mitigate the impact from our development. So we can't ignore that. That's not something, development cannot happen until that capacity is secured with Thames Water. So that is absolutely something we will have to do, and that would be part and parcel of any new development.
But this has been said before about the current building that we have, the newer buildings that we have. That has been said before. The promise has not been kept. And Thames Water have recently written, I believe it was a 6-page report. Don't fact check me on, well, do fact check me on that. I don't know if it was 6 pages, damning the latest proposal. Unfortunately, it was turned over for other reasons. But Thames Water themselves are saying, no more, we cannot cope. And I suppose, yeah, you can just pass the buck on to Thames Water, I suppose, can't you? But they do go out. There are lorries parked around Buntingford that do go and pump out sewage. So I suppose that's what we'll have to deal with in Throcking if you get this approved. So that's a bit sad, isn't it?
Any other points? I'll move to ward councillors then. Councillor Nichols, do you have some questions?
I do. Putting aside the obvious disregard for the local neighbourhood and district plan policies regarding this application, people choose to live in this rural setting as they value the intrinsic value of the local natural landscape. Do you think it's appropriate to impose an industrialised urban development in this on this local community, and do you acknowledge the mental and physical harm this could cause local residents?
I think just coming back on the principle of development in this location, obviously conscious that the site isn't allocated in the local plan or the neighbour. Sorry, yeah, apologies. Is that any better? Yeah, just touched on the principle of development, and obviously conscious that the site is outside the development boundary and not allocated in the district plan or the neighbourhood plan. There is a identified need for additional housing growth across East Hertfordshire, given the recent appeal decision to the south of the site that was decided last month, and the evidence we've submitted with the application identifies quite a significant need, growing affordability ratios within the district as well. I think the average at the moment is about 10 times the median salary to house price, and that's growing all the time. So I think there's a clear need for additional growth, and given the fact that there is a shortage of land supply, that the council are required to look elsewhere for sites outside of the district plan and neighbourhood plan. So we haven't disregarded the policies. We've reviewed those as part of the planning statement and the planning balance, taking them into account as far as possible. And in terms of the principle, as I suggested, that the weight to be afforded to that is obviously more limited now, given the council situation in terms of the lack of supply of housing in the district.
we're already 500 homes over the allocation as part of the existing district plan, and we have not been allocated any strategic sites because of that over allocation. The 5-year supply is designed to cover the whole district and not just Buntingford. This will put an enormous amount of pressure on local resources on an inappropriate site. And there are other planning applications in consideration and have decisions made on them, and this is an inappropriate burden for the local community.
Anything else? Because that was more of a statement than a question. It's all right, don't worry. I know. Councillor Jones, questions, please.
Yes, certainly. I do have questions. The petitioners from Cotterwood and Throckin have done very well in asking some of the questions that I was going to ask. The main one, I think Sue has just mentioned again, is and the developers in their presentation at the start, they talked about the visual aspect of this site. I mean, there's no two ways about it. This is a huge site, 600 dwellings, the largest development that has been presented to Buntingford. It is massive. It is outside the town development boundary. You seem to have disregard for the neighbourhood plan and the Buntingford community area neighbourhood plan, and you're putting everything now on the lack of 5-year housing land supply. When you originally put this application forward, the appeal decision for the 350 homes hadn't been heard then. So I don't know, are you clutching at straws? I'm not really sure. That could be a question. But there is a total disregard to the neighbourhood plan and the Buntingford community area neighbourhood plan. And this is prime agricultural land that we'll be losing. I think that's something that hasn't been mentioned. We'll be losing that. 600 homes, so the traffic impact is going to be huge. 600 homes, we're looking at what, 1,500, maybe 2,000 extra residents, 1,000 extra vehicles. That's a massive impact on the traffic network already in Buntingford. I feel for them in Throckin. You mentioned construction traffic. Okay, that can be controlled. You can have no construction traffic signs at the top and bottom of Throckin Lane. Once this is constructed, so residents with their vehicles coming out of the new development to the north onto Throckin Lane, if they want to go to Stevenage, Baldock, etc., they're going to go through Throckin. That is the shortest route. So that impact will be there forevermore, not just through the construction.
Councillor Jones, it is questions rather than statements. I know.
I want to hear their response to
well, I haven't heard a question yet.
Well, my question is, I'll start. I won't start right from the beginning, but the disregard. Why do you consider you disregard our neighbourhood plan and district plan? And what about the impact on the huge number of vehicles that is going to be going through, not only through Buntingford, but through Throckin as well?
So in terms of, you're right, when we put this application in, the Vista appeal would not been determined. So we initially took an interest in this site, looking to promote it through the local plan. As you say, it is a larger scale site. It's not sort of usually a smaller scale application that you would necessarily look to do as a speculative application. Unfortunately, the local plan review has not started at pace. I appreciate it has started now, but sort of, it is well beyond its sort of 5 years point that it should have been started that review. We saw other smaller scale schemes coming forward around Buntingford, and you saw the same issue happening again that happened sort of 8-9 years ago, where you had that flurry of smaller developments that brought nothing with it. So we thought, look, we believe that this site is a good opportunity for the town to actually have something a bit different, have something that provides that critical mass that can bring other things with it, other facilities with it. So it's not just 200 houses here, 300 houses here. This is something that can then deliver facilities alongside with it, such as the first school, the local centre, the potential for health centre, older persons accommodation. So this is not just housing. This comes with facilities as well, obviously the employment area as well to the south. So we saw this as a real opportunity for the town to do something different, to sort of get on the front foot in a way, in terms of how Buntingford has developed going forward. It's rather than accepting smaller scale sites that don't bring anything with them, let's come forward and talk about a slightly larger scale site that actually then brings some benefits with it. Obviously, I know you don't agree about the parkland, but that is a huge potential benefit for the town in terms of the parkland and the sports facilities. So, we came and had discussions initially with Buntingford Town Council to try and say, look, we're here as something else, an alternative, a way to look at the development of your town, so to get some real benefits out of a development rather than just having to accept just housing by itself. So hopefully that gives you a bit of context as to sort of why now. I think in terms of traffic impact, I'll probably shimmy that one over to James, if that's all right.
Yeah, I'll just say that we've submitted a transport assessment with the proposal, and we have discussions with the local highway authority and agree the assumptions in that. And in terms of the distribution of traffic, we use sensors to forecast where it's going to go in the journeys, and vast majority is towards the east, towards the A10. So, and obviously we'll be discussing that with the local highway authority, but they appear to be in agreement with that distribution. And I'll just reiterate the proposals where we're trying to change that priority on Throcking Lane to deter traffic in that direction as well.
On that, I don't know if it's worth it, but obviously, you say it's obviously such a narrow, restrictive road. It's got lots of issues on it. If people do that once and face issues, they're not going to do it again. They're going to take the easiest route, the path of least resistance, and that will be through the new development and onto the main road.
If I could just come on to the traffic issue. Okay, so we've talked about Throcking Lane. These extra 1,000+ vehicles are going to be accessing the A10, as you're saying. We already have problems on the single A10 section from Buntingford through the Westmill area. Had you had any discussions with highways on dualling that area, or there was also a scheme to improve the southern roundabout at where the Buntingford First School is? That didn't progress due to lack of funding. Perhaps this is an opportunity. Have you had that discussion at all with highways?
It's not been something that's been raised to date by County Highways. We are aware of the issue at Westmill, and that has been raised actually in response to the employment application, I believe. So it's certainly something that we can discuss further with Highways, but it's not been something that they've specifically raised with us.
I'm going to open the questions up to other councillors. What I would say is, for those that are on DMC, please remember not to predispose or predetermine, and don't ask questions that could make you such, please. Do I have any takers? Councillor Estop.
Can I ask the landowner developer, have you submitted this site as part of the call for sites?
not yet, but we are aware of the deadline, and we will be we will be submitting it by the end of the month. I believe the deadline is, yes.
From what I could gather, looking at the presentation, you have access to a number of fields. It looks as if you filled them up. Could I ask whether, or this is for David Locke really, have you looked at strategic options for how that land could be used? In other words, options where you use less of the site for a different number of houses and jobs.
I'll answer it. I think so. Simon obviously developed sort of the area that we asked him to, I guess, to a certain extent. But we did look at smaller options in this area. But I think, I guess, as you've all alluded to, we are crossing the A10. There is the need to do something more strategic here. I think if you had a smaller scale development, potentially sort of surrounding the existing employment area, that it sort of wouldn't create, again, the what's the word I'm looking for? Critical mass. Thank you, Reece. It wouldn't create the critical mass that you'd be needed to actually then bring additional facilities and benefits with that. So again, it would be the point I guess I was making earlier to the councillor is that you then just have a smaller scheme for housing. You don't have a scheme that brings with it those additional facilities in terms of, you know, as I say, employment, parkland, local centre, school, and again the critical mass to improve the bus services, the bus connections, and also those active travel connections as well. So it was a conscious choice to go for a larger scale site to, say, bring the benefits with that. So it's not just another housing site for Buntingford. This is a comprehensive development that brings additional benefits and facilities with it.
So I take that as a no, that you didn't look at options. And maybe perhaps I could suggest that you continue to look at options. Then the next question is, in the presentation, it was all very worked out. There's a lot of detail in terms of the layout, the parkland, the circulation, the access, all that. So why are you making an outline planning application?
Sorry, it's me again. So Hallam Land, we are not obviously housing developers ourselves. We are land promoters. So we take sites through to the point of getting outline planning permission, and then we will sell that on to house builders, work with them then to ensure that we've got the correct parameters in place to allow them to come forward with the reserve matters, more detailed applications. So it's more of a case of, I guess, how Hallam operates as a business. So.
I think just to add, the amount of detail illustrated in the plan is supposed to be supportive of the principle to show how it could be developed out. So it's about showing that it's really deliverable. And again, Reece mentioned that we had a design review panel earlier. That level of detail has enabled the panel to come to an informed, or coming towards an informed view about the proposals, and that added layer of detail, you know, gives more certainty about what is actually achievable rather than a red line, which some applications do, just a red line, or very strategic blobs. So we've actually looked at a level of detail again to work through the principle, so within that red line, to come up with the best proposals possible.
We didn't, this hinges on a bridge. There's a bridge over the A10. I didn't get a sense of what that bridge will be like. Do you have an image of what you envisage that bridge to be like?
That's great, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, it's an illustration, again, of the art of the possible, layering in, again, the detail. So the two bridges illustrated in this, so the one on the right is the existing bridge, the one on the left is the new bridge. And again, I think there's still opportunities for whether it's a replacement bridge or an additional bridge going forward. But again, that is about improving the connectivity over the A10. It's something was discussed earlier, again, within the design review, and one of the elements that was raised there was about, the point where you're, turning around, over the top of the A10 is quite an intimidating environment. And, James and I have worked on schemes where that's down to the devil in the detail. The parapets of the bridge, they can be designed in such a way that you design out the noise so that the parapets are high enough, they can be clear so that you have intervisibility rather than going through a tunnel, but that will help with the noise. At the moment, it's like an open railing. You are completely exposed to all of those elements, whereas the focus of the new bridge combined with the existing would give really good, improved, safe, convenient access across the A10 for walking and cycling to connect into the town, but also, again, core part of the proposals with the assets on site and the infrastructure and the school and elderly housing, potentially the doctor's surgery, but in particular the park, is there is two-way movement from the town out to these facilities. So again, making sure that it's dealing with those two-way movements.
Councillor Stop, I'm slightly conscious of time. Can I just check if anybody else wants to ask any questions and come back to you if there's time? Councillor Marlowe? Councillor Stowe? Go for it.
It's just one question to you, the neighbourhood people. Does the neighbourhood plan identify land that might be suitable for development? Thank you.
Sorry, if I may, one point, and obviously the people that are planning can correct me on this. So Hallam development projects, you take the site to outline planning. You then subcontract or sell off. So when you have outline planning, the builder can then go in for amendments to that outline planning. So what you take that we're all seeing as outline planning that you're proposing, can that be changed then by the builders? So the builders then are brought in and they can then apply for extensions for all sorts, because as I understand it, outline planning is not the be all and end all. You can apply for differences.
Can I bring in a council officer, please, planning officer?
Yeah, so in terms of the planning process for an outline application, if an outline application is submitted, then there'll normally be parameter plans with that, so it will set out sort of the basic principles. And then if planning permission was granted, then the applicant would then, or whoever's developing the site would need to submit reserve matters at a later date. So they'd have to be, the reserve matters would need to be submitted in line with the parameters of the parameter plans. And also there can be other sort of planning conditions that are attached to a planning permission, which the reserve matters would need to follow as well.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So if I can ask the petitioners against the application to sum up your position in 5 minutes, please.
So really, I think between us, we have sort of like voiced many concerns with the planning proposal. I really don't think that at this point, the only way to make this application acceptable to the local community and in the spirit of this forum, which is designed to discuss and explore the solutions and the problems, we would like to suggest that the plans be revised. There is really nothing that we have heard that will change our view. This is not a suitable application for this site. We would recommend that Hallam withdraw this application now and allow the relevant stakeholders to explore the available options for this site and work with the district planners to identify a more appropriate sites for housing within the district where suitable transport facilities and infrastructure already exist.
Thank you. So, my job to try and make some summing up and consensus about that. I think we've got two relatively diametrically opposed positions. The applicants are giving a strategic site that has sufficient massing and size to be able to deliver infrastructure improvements, which will include connectivity across existing public rights of way. It will also assist with making more sustainable transport options into Buntingford. It has been fed by consultation with town councils and parish councils. The development is east of the ridge line, so it shouldn't impact on the views from Buntingford too much because it should be lower, but it will be visible. There is master planning and there are a lot of green connectivity, and with the infrastructure improvements, these will include a primary school, the town park, and a number of other items such as playing fields, plus the employment land to the south west of Buntingford, south of the site. There will be 3 crossings to get into Buntingford. These will be the right of way, which is the existing, which will be improved with lighting and surfacing so that it is more usable 24 hours. There will be the central one, which is at the existing Ridgeway crossing. And then finally, there is the bridge across Baldock Road, and hopefully I got those all in the right order and the right description. With most of what you're building, there will be buffer planting, and that will provide screening for the sustainable transport links. The town park is approximately 33 football pitches in size, and there's also an additional 5 hectares next to the main employment area, which gives a wider green Buntingford loop around the land to the west of the A10. There will be a local centre which may have a number of different uses. They're not quite set in stone, so it could be community facilities, it could be retail, it could be other bits and pieces, but I didn't get a sense that they were set out particularly. There will be also things like Dutch roundabouts onto the main access point. And also a bus hub that will increase the number of users of the bus services, which means that a 30-minute service for Buntingford would then be achievable. On the converse of that, and this connected through a number of different themes, the first one was mostly around the connectivity, because any travel to the west has to go through Throcking. There is a narrow point at the edge of Throcking where if you get lorries going in 2 separate directions, they get stuck. Also, if there are problems on the Baldock Road, then all the traffic will go through Throcking. There are also concerns about which way construction traffic would come, whether that would end up trying to get through Throcking, because obviously it will be HGVs mainly, but also around the Baldock Road itself, because there was a petition, and since 2017 you've been working to try and get the Baldock Road knocked down from being an A road to being a B road because of the narrowness of it and the fact that it is not suitable as an A road. In 2018, there was approximately 9,500 vehicles a day using the Baldock Road, and at peak times that's 1,000 vehicles an hour. So that shows that there is quite a heavy usage of that road. And one of the things I picked up is, and I may be paraphrasing this slightly, that you'd quite like a bypass round Throcking that was an alternate route. So that it's not coming through the centre of Throcking, because the road coming through the centre of Throcking separates the village into two halves, and it is difficult to cross, and there are issues. The second major point was around the landscape and character, because Throcking is set in a rural landscape. It has been there since 1066. And there are a number of very historic buildings because it is an old settlement, and that the views of it have mostly stayed unchanged since 1066, or there's probably a few more cars going along the road to it nowadays. The other concern around landscape was around the Valley Brook chalk stream, and you wanted reassurances that that would be protected from any contamination going into it, particularly in light of the fact that this will have suds. There was a suds drawing which showed the drainage towards the northeast, and I believe the streams to the west. So hopefully that could be resolved, but it is still a point on there. One of the key things was around the fact that you're in the Rib Valley setting as well. The other point on the settings was primarily around the district plan and the neighbourhood plan. When the district plan was made, Buntingford had had quite a lot of speculative development, so there was no allocation for Buntingford to build additional houses at Buntingford, and that is why the neighbourhood plan and the district plan don't identify any strategic sites in the district plan and the neighbourhood plan, as I understand it. The proposed site is outside the key settlement boundaries, and therefore the petitioners consider it to be out with the district plan policy associated with that. One of the other main issues was around insufficient infrastructure. Buntingford hasn't had a railway station since Beeching. It doesn't have a lot of buses, and there are not the connections to the other towns. The other aspect that was brought up was the cumulative impact of three separate applications from this particular applicant around the solar farm, the employment site and the housing site, because it's three sites, not just the one. Then the final speaker was talking about the fact that the petitioners don't consider the site to be sustainable. And there was a couple of reasons around that. One, that it is located outside the settlement boundary, so it is not in accordance with the various policies that we want. Secondly, it builds on agricultural land, and also that it displaced wildlife, and there was a number of species mentioned, including tawny owls, great-crested newts, bats and hedgehogs, all of which are protected species. The economic development, the economic reasons for it were also somewhat were considered by the petitioners as not to be striking, because this is primarily for housing use and there isn't local employment in Buntingford. Most of the employment within Buntingford, I believe you said that the two top employments were hospitality and education, and that the majority of the people that live in Buntingford work in places like Ware or Stansted and have to commute there by car because of the lack of sustainable transport options. Finally, I think that there was a number of questions primarily centering on transport and HGVs, and there were some answers to that, which were mainly that the traffic would be considered by HCC Highways and the applicant to be mostly going towards the east. Therefore, the western route, which would go through Throcking, shouldn't be used as much, although there was the extrapolation that there would be approximately 1,000 more journeys a day from Councillor Jones, who is Hertfordshire County Council's, but I'm sure he can take that up with his highways officers. The wildlife habitat, there was also a point made by the applicants that basically that will be improved. There will be a biodiversity net gain of just under 14%, 13.85-ish. And that is partly achieved because the majority of the land at the moment is ploughed fields, which the applicant said would have a low net biodiversity. So I think that we have got to a point where I don't think there's an awful lot of consensus to be achieved. So as that is the case, I think I will close the meeting. Thank you to everybody. It's been a really interesting meeting. I think there were some good points from both sides. And I think that there could be some consensus to be had, but I think it needs a lot more work and a lot more discussion. Thank you.